House passed a short-term bill with bipartisan support Tuesday to avoid a government shutdown and punting the financial football into January and February. The 336-95 vote represented a win for Speaker Mike Johnson, but not all Republicans backed the so-called laddered continuing resolution. A group of Republicans came out in opposition as it lacked spending cuts. However, 209 Democrats joined 127 Republicans to get the bill moved forward to the Senate, while 93 Republicans and 2 Democrats voted against it.
And I want to cut spending right now, and I would like to put policy writers on this. But when you have a 3-vote majority, as we do right now, we don't have the votes to be able to advance that right now. Look, it took decades to get into this mess, right? I've been at the job less than 3 weeks, right? I can't turn an aircraft carrier overnight. But this was a very important first step to get us to the next stage so that we can change how Washington works.
Johnson added the laddered resolution would allow conservatives to go into the fight over the next 2 months and talk about getting the southern border under control, Israel and Ukraine, as well as necessitated oversight. The Senate is expected to pass the measure by the end of the week. Mike Johnson also revealed on Tuesday his endorsement of former President Trump for the 2024 Republican nomination. When asked who he would be endorsing on CNBC, Johnson did not hesitate.
I have endorsed him wholeheartedly. Look, I was one of the closest allies that President Trump had in Congress. He had a phenomenal first term. Those first 2 years, as you all know, we brought about the greatest economic numbers in the history of the world, not just the country, because his policies worked. And I'm all in for President Trump. I expect he'll be our nominee.
Johnson, as you heard, has been a staunch Donald Trump supporter and served on Trump's impeachment defense team. And in Michigan on Tuesday, a judge ruled former President Trump can remain on the state's 2024 presidential primary ballot. The decision rejects an attempt to use a Civil War-era law to remove Trump for his alleged role in the January 6th unrest at the U.S. Capitol. And also this morning, Donald Trump's legal team has requested a mistrial be declared in his New York fraud case. The motion refers to the trial judge and his law clerk's alleged bias against the former president.
Senate Democrats blocked a standalone Israel aid package Tuesday that passed the House with bipartisan support earlier this month. Republican Roger Marshall of Kansas led the charge in the Senate and sought unanimous consent on the $14.3 billion package. But Democrats balked over Ukraine funding not being included. During a press conference, Marshall and Ohio Senator J.D. Vance made the case for the Democrats denying Israel funding.
So we should be asking ourselves, why are the Democrats holding Israel hostage? The answer is because they know they can't defend the president's disastrous Ukraine policy on its own terms.
So though they spend 3/4 of the time telling us why we should fund Ukraine, no one will stand up and say we should not fund Israel now. No one has an argument for that. They seem to be allergic to the word Israel.
Marshall echoed what Missouri Senator Eric Schmitt said: bring the Ukraine funding to a floor vote and stop Israel using Israel as leverage. All right, let's talk with the president of wallbuilders.com, co-author of the American Story, Victory News contributor Tim Barton. Welcome to Victory News.
Thanks, Greg. Good to be with you.
All right, Senator Patty Murray of Washington, the top appropriator in the Senate, led the move to block the House funding bill for Israel, saying it needed funding for Ukraine in it as well. So much for the goodwill, and we're all united here, right? Why are the Senate Democrats playing politics with our Jewish allies during a war with Hamas?
Yeah, I think what we heard from the senators just now, J.D. Vance explained it well, is the Democrats know that they will not get the funding they want for Ukraine in a standalone bill. What's happening right now with this standalone funding for Israel bill, that's the way bills should be done. We should pick a topic. We should write a bill, a resolution on that topic. We should vote on it, and it should be that one single topic we're voting on. There shouldn't be confusion. We shouldn't be having all these other earmarks for adding. But also the reality is, when we look at what's happening with Ukraine and the disastrous policies that Biden has enacted, there's been no oversight, no accountability with the more than $100 billion we've sent them. We don't know where it's gone. We don't know who's used it, who's spent it. We don't know how it's being utilized or what all is happening with the additional funding that they are now requesting. And by the way, we do know on some level that we are paying pensions for Ukrainian politicians. We're paying the salaries for Ukrainian politicians. So the funding we're doing is not just going to the war. And we're talking about only a fraction of the money that's gone to Ukraine coming to Israel. So certainly it seems like Democrats recognize they cannot get their policies done unless they tie it to something like Israel, which is pretty unethical at this point.
Let's bring in wallbuilders.com President Tim Barton once again. Tim, last month, the California Teachers Association held a conference advising teachers on best practices for subverting parents, even recommending surveillance of students' internet activity and hallway conversations in order to target children for personal invitations to LGBTQ clubs. How can parents keep their kids in these public schools?
Yeah, that is a great question. And parents have to wake up and recognize that public schools in the modern era are not public schools from the 1960s, 70s, or 80s when so many parents attended and they remember, hey, it wasn't that bad right now. Even maybe the 90s, it wasn't that bad. But what we're doing right now, we are grossly perverting kids, not just with this sexualization, but we saw for a decade or two, the last decade or two in American universities, where we have seen kids go to universities and they love Jesus, they love their family, they love America, and they go through these universities and they come out hating Jesus, hating their family, and hating America. And parents, tens of thousands, have been so saddened by losing their kids. Well, now that ideology is no longer just universities. It's coming down all the way from kindergarten up through 12th grade. And it's not just anti-Jesus. It is now very pro-devil in many respects. It's pro-evil. And parents have to wake up to this reality and find some alternative education for their kids. As Jesus pointed out, what does it profit a man to gain the whole world and forfeit his soul? It is not worth our kids' soul to have them in these schools.
Yeah, Tim, a wake-up call is right. You know, a FOIA request by Fox News has revealed the Secret Service was not telling the truth regarding the White House cocaine investigation earlier this year. They said there was no DNA and they destroyed the bag of coke, but they did find DNA on the baggie. They processed it and placed it in an evidence vault. Tim, what do you think the Secret Service knows, and why do you think they're preserving it?
Let me just start by saying I am shocked that the White House was not honest in their press release about DNA. I'm shocked. I can't believe they were not honest. Okay, no, I'm not shocked at all. It's pretty much what we've come to expect, is we don't get a lot of honesty from the Biden administration, from the press secretary. And I think that the Secret Service knows exactly whose it was. There's never been a question or wonderment for them. There are cameras on every bit of the White House. They know exactly whose it was. They probably have video footage of them taking it out of their pocket and doing whatever they were doing with it. But is this going to come to the light for the American people? Probably not during the Biden administration. If we have a different president, maybe. But this is part of the games that we are seeing with the Biden administration. They're not transparent and they're not truthful.
Yeah, and are you going to hear the mainstream media call them out about it? Probably not. Now, Tim, you heard the story about Mark Wayne Mullen and the head of the Teamsters almost squaring off, but Representative Tim Burkett of Tennessee also claimed Kevin McCarthy, the former speaker, elbowed him in the kidneys. And the Representative James Comer called fellow Congressman Jared Moskowitz of Florida this.
Claiming my time. No, I'm not going to give you your time back. We can stop the clock. You all continue to, you look like a Smurf here just going around and all this stuff. No.
Tim, is civility coming to an end on Capitol Hill between our congressmen and women?
Well, I think definitely we're seeing some rising tensions that does tend to lead to a more base response from individuals, a little more fleshly response. It's not the first time it's happened, and it won't be the last time it happens in Congress, because we know people, apart from the regeneration of Jesus in their heart and their life, we're pretty fleshly people. We can do some sinful, evil things. We can go back to the 1860s when you had Charles Sumner, who was a senator against slavery, and he was railing against some of the pro-slavery senators and how evil they were for their positions. And Preston Brooks was in Congress. He was a congressman over in the House. He came over, and with a cane, he beat nearly to death Charles Sumner. We haven't quite gotten there yet, but certainly what we recognize is we need some more Jesus and ultimately morals for our congressmen, for our leaders, for our senators.